writer, speaker, author, researcher, political commentary, political expert, MSNBC host, major mainstream media host, independent black media host. I mean, the list goes on and on. Friend of the show, someone I'm proud to say I actually text from time to time if I can be so corny and share that. How you doing, man?
I'm functional. It's been a really wild 3-4 weeks now in sort of American politics. Classes are about to start again at Morgan. So in a week, I get to go back to my favorite focus group, which is my students, and find out how the last month has hit for the 18 to 22-year-old crowd. And these are going to be incoming freshmen. I'm faculty at Morgan State University, full professor now. So I got promoted this summer.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But it's going to be very, very interesting because my students they've run the gambit. I teach classes in political journalism. So sometimes they come in with a certain level of knowledge, but oftentimes if they're freshmen, it tells me a lot about where their parents are. Like if you come into school and you don't know anything, I'm like, oh, wow, okay, they don't talk about, whoever's raising you doesn't talk about this sort of thing. But there's been so much in this campaign season that's broken through. I mean, usually in politics, it's like nobody cares until after Labor Day. I don't think that's the case now. I don't think, Project 2025 is all over TikTok. Taraji P. Henson talked about it at the BET Awards. Joe Biden getting dumped, campus protests. Like, I feel like I'm going to hear some interesting things from incoming freshmen this year.
I would imagine, to your point, like the timing of all of it, and thinking about it's. And I also think you have such a unique lens because you are talking to students as adults, right? If you get out of college, you're just working. Like there is no more summer break, spring break, whatever, summer off. It's just like, so for me, this has been like kind of one continuous thing. However, I would imagine, to your point, you kind of see these students at snapshots in time throughout the year, as opposed to them kind of getting like a constant flow of experience day to day, month to month, across the through the year. I want to get to it though. I have some real questions, right? Because again, like I think about Living Corporate, and I think about the fact that there are things that we talk about in like mainstream political frameworks, mainstream media political frameworks that get a little annoying. I want to kind of break beyond that a little bit if we can. So the first thing is, there's like these larger narratives, and when I was young, Black folks and white folks, brown folks, like when older people would say, look, essentially all these parties are the same. Like politicians are politicians. Like, and I was like, that feels a little simplistic or pessimistic or whatever the case is. Probably wasn't saying pessimistic when I was 12, but my point is, I was like, that doesn't seem real. However, I want to throw something to you off the bat. So Trump attempted a coup, right? He attempted a coup on the United States. He tried to usurp
January 6th.
January 6th. Yep. He attempted to usurp the democratic process and the peaceful transfer of power to retain power. Mm-hmm. The Democrats did not perform a violent coup. However, like they did some would argue they sidestepped the political process of like going through the process you are to like actually elect a candidate or platform a nominee by having Biden step down. There was a lot of pressure to step down. A lot of people said, hey, why are we even putting Biden up 4 years ago? He's too old. So like pessimistically young, naive Zach and like other people out there look at some things like that and say, dang, okay, I'm not saying it wasn't the right decision because Biden is too old. So like, I'm not knocking the outcome. The outcome of Biden I don't think he should have been, he shouldn't have run again. However, like, what is your thought on the process that the Democrats have taken to position this candidate who everyone is excited for, and I think rightfully so when you look at our options, compared to the process that many would advocate for?
So there's two things with this. There's a theoretical and there's a practical. right? So I'll tell you the practical first. The practical was that you had a large number of Democratic pollsters and insiders who were very concerned with Biden's ability to win the election. And their concerns were based on polling that most regular people, and I would say even myself, I had to ask some questions, most regular people did not have access to. So prior to the debate with Donald Trump, right, on June 27th, what you had was a situation where Joe Biden and Trump were within a margin of error, maybe 1% of each other, right? But what pollsters were saying, internal polling amongst the Democratic Party was like, Joe Biden is not recreating the winning coalition from 2020, right? So a lot of times what they'll do is they'll say, all right, you got elected in 2020. What percentage of the people that you had in 2020 are willing to vote for you now? And they have polls showing that only like 85% of the people who voted for Biden in 2020 are willing to vote for him now. Those are terrible numbers. You should be at 91, 95, right? Like if I voted for you 4 years ago, why wouldn't I be voting for you again? And these people weren't necessarily turning to Trump. They were just saying, I don't like him. I don't want to vote for him, right? So that's why you had former President Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff just stabbing Joe Biden in the front, back, and the side. His debate performance, it's important to understand the polling didn't change because of the debate performance.
Okay.
Most Americans did not change their opinion after that debate. What happened was the press turned on Biden after that debate. The political press, and I always think this is important, Zach. I appreciate talking because you're not a political podcast, so there's certain things that I like sharing so that folks who are listening to you understand. When I say political press, because I hate it when people just say the media. No, the media is a bunch of different things, right? That's like saying Hollywood. Well, Comcast and Time Warner are not the same thing as Amazon. You can't just say Hollywood, right? And the same sort of thing applies to the press. The political press in America is the 3 24-hour cable networks, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Hill, and Politico, and then Axios. That is the political press. Daily Beast is not the political press. Salon and Slate are not the political press, okay? So you got to understand that it's those 5 or 6 entities that deliver political messages, right, that then members of Congress and elected officials pay attention to, and that's what forms their worldview. After that debate, the political press was like, oh my God, we can't vote for Biden anymore. And the political press has always been critical of Biden and has always given Trump a pass. I said, look, that debate was bad, but it was bad on both sides. Joe Biden trailed off. Donald Trump sounded like a crazy person. If Donald Trump had literally pooped in his pants during that debate, the headline in the New York Times the next day would have been, Joe Biden fails to respond to explosive charges. Okay, like that's how bad the press coverage has been. That Donald Trump can do crazy stuff all the time, but it's Joe Biden who's the problem. Okay, so after that, that's when the elected officials who have been sitting on these internal polls are like, all right, look, the door is open. We got to get this guy out of here. So that's the practical thing that you have going on is that you had a party that was like, our standard bearer is going to lose. And he's going to lose so bad that he may drag down other people. And then you have a political press that's like, we ain't really ever liked this guy anyway. We like Trump because he draws attention to us and he's performing poorly. That leads us to what happened with Harris. At a very basic level, I don't have a problem with the process. You know why? Because if Joe Biden had died or transitioned or passed away, Kamala Harris would have been the nominee.
She's the VP.
There was no clue. Yeah, she's the VP. Like, you vote for a ticket. So the fact that he stepped down and basically gave a big middle finger to former President Obama and Nancy Pelosi, he pulled like Pacino at the end of any given Sunday. It's like, oh, you thought I was leaving, come on, Willie. He basically said, because Joe Biden could have just stepped down and said, all right, have at it. But he said, no, I'm going to endorse Kamala Harris. And the Harris campaign had been working on the possibility of this occurring, right? And they managed to secure support. And I want people to also understand this. The morning, it was a Sunday that Joe Biden stepped down. I was on the weekend show with Alicia Menendez, Simone Sanders, and Michael Steele on MSNBC. I was on the morning show, runs from 8 to 10. We had on a spokesperson for the Biden campaign. So at like 10 o'clock in the morning, this guy is like, Joe Biden's not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. He's in this to win it. He's in it to win it. Back up, everybody. He was very vociferous about the fact that Joe Biden wasn't going anywhere. And literally, before I got home from studio in D.C., it was like, wait, Joe Biden stepped out. So this was a surprise to everyone. So I think people have to understand the process was pretty clean and smooth, but there was a lot of things going on beforehand that led to him finally dropping.
You know, it's interesting because like in real time, I think, first of all, I mean, we're living in the middle of history, because I don't know if I've ever especially, you know, I'm grown, right? So of course, like I was alive during like the Clinton administration, but I was like in second or third grade, right? So like seeing certain things now, like as a grown adult, seeing like AOC say, hey, look, I know some of y'all think that this is just folks wanting Harris to come in and be that person, but I'm telling you, there's different interests. There's certain people who don't do this and blah, blah. So it's just been really wild to see in real time. You know, we have you for a good time, not a long time. I'm going to keep it moving because I want to talk a little bit about Kamala Harris and all this commentary around her identity and race, right? Like, I mean, I want to say we just saw Nancy Mace. We saw Michael Eric Dyson, who did do his thing, but I still think handled her with two kid gloves during that discussion. I'm gonna describe her. Yeah. I'm gonna call her whatever name I want to, whatever I'm gonna call her. Very, very few people publicly willing to say, hey, he's wrong for this commentary he's saying about Kamala decided to be black. You know, his comments at the NABJ. I'm curious, like, it seems as if white America is coming face to face with their own, just like, once again, like their own racial ignorance and cultural incompetence, right? Like these discussions about Kamala isn't black, she's not this, she's not. I'm like, and again, like we've heard all the things. Look, she went to Howard. If anything, Kamala is the paragon of like black elite. Like she pledged undergrad, AKA at Howard. She has a huge legacy, all these connections. And yet, like, we're still having these really, like, these very, like, almost elementary discussions about identity. Like, how are you seeing the media navigate that? And how are you having those discussions on and off camera with the folks in your political circles?
So here's the thing. It's kind of a non-issue. And this is an important thing to understand. Again, I said at the beginning, and any people take something away from this, I'm talking about the political press. I'm not talking about regular people. I'm not talking about the Chicago Sun-Times. I'm talking about the political press. Harris's identity is a non-issue. And the only reason that became a topic of discussion is because from 2015 on, the moment he walked down the stairs of Trump Tower, the political press in America has been on that Trump narcotic. They are addicted to covering him. Okay, addicted to it for years and years and years. Even for 4 years of the Biden presidency, didn't you notice that there were always so many stories about Trump? It was, what did he say? What did he tweet? What's he in trouble for? What's the trial? Trump, constant coverage of him. And what happened was when Joe Biden stepped out of the race and then endorsed Harris, suddenly for 12 straight days, it was like the political press went cold turkey. They were shivering. They were like, oh, I don't know. I haven't got my hit. I haven't talked about Trump in days. And what they realize is, oh my God, people are interested in this Harris character. They like her story. They like what she's talking about. They like some of her policies. They want something new, right? So what Trump had never seen is, I mean, think about this, Zach. In 8 years, we had not gone 12 straight days without Donald Trump being the A or B block story in every single cable program for 8 years. Okay. And for 12 days, it was Harris. And Trump was like, oh my God, what are we doing here? Like, I mean, the Republicans were freaking out, and they're not a real party anymore. You know, they're a dime store front for a terrorist organization called MAGA. but they were shocked that the political press, have found a new place to get a high, right? And so what happened was Donald Trump went to NABJ. He never should have been invited. The NABJ, I'm not unique in saying this. There are many people within the organization were highly critical of inviting Donald Trump. They wouldn't even let Kamala Harris come in virtually, since she was at Barbara Lee's funeral in Houston. She couldn't get up there, but they let Trump in despite the fact that he had physically attacked and sent his followers after April Ryan, Yamiche Alcindor, he has attacked prominent members of the NABJ, journalists of the year of the NABJ, yet you invite him there. And then when you get into a stare down about him having a fact checker, you back off, right? Like he should not have been there. But my point was simply this. Donald Trump was like, I haven't broken through the news in 12 straight days. What can I do to get the attention back on me? Oh, I'll talk about race and gender. So that's the only reason we had a 3-day blip of any sort of discussion about Harris's identity. No one questions her identity in the real world. You got those crazy ADOS people online, but the vast majority of people don't care, right? It's like, look, I'm sorry, but you grew up in Oakland, you cook Jamaican food, you pledge AKA, you went to Howard. Let me be clear. You pledged in the 80s, okay? You pledged at Howard in the 80s. I'm sorry, but I would say that her resume, if we're going to speak colloquially, it's certainly blacker than Obama's, if we're going to go there, right? So, yeah, it was a fake discussion. No one's questioning Vice President Harris, possibly President Harris's identity. It was an attempt to distract from the fact that the Trump campaign was starving for oxygen. And
speaking of fake or real discussions, there's been a lot of commentary around, hey, black men are the biggest. There's been a lot of commentary on Twitter. Black men are the biggest question mark around this election. And I feel like, Dr. Johnson, like every 4 years, and again, like I'm thinking about for every 4 years since I could vote. So Obama's first term was the first time I was able to vote. But I remember even then, like just online, and you see it rev up as algorithms continue to change and become increasingly toxic with Elon Musk and all these other players. It's almost like there's this boogeyman of black men voting GOP in droves. Right. But the data doesn't show that. Like, so as far as I can see, and I want to say, Dr. Johnson, it was you and then Howard Bryant of ESPN, both of y'all separately, not on a joint panel, on separate discussions at LivingCorporate, said like, hey, black folks, both men and women, have been voting overwhelmingly Democrat for the past 50 plus years. So like, but talk to me about this election. Like, do you feel that's more of this boogeyman, or do you think that's a real concern?
It's a boogeyman. It's a boogeyman. Get me on? Yeah, it's like the old 70s song. No, it's not a thing. It's not a real thing. And I love Howard. Howard's like one of my favorite people. I've had him on my podcast on Slate. Here's the thing. Throughout most voting history, right, after you had the transition of African Americans moving from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party, which happened in the mid-'60s, on average, Republican presidential candidates usually got between 10, maybe 12, 14 max, but usually between 10 and 12% of the African American vote. That has always been the standard voting record for the last 40 or something years in America. Once Obama was elected and reelected, those numbers dropped. Republicans were only getting like 6 to 8% of the black vote, right? Now, the truth of the matter is, since then, the numbers have creeped back to what you would expect for Republicans, which is they should be at 10 to 12%. But what you have is a lack of context in the political press. And so you always have these stories like, oh my gosh, Joe Biden is failing with black voters. It's like, no, Joe Biden is doing about what regular Democratic candidates do with black voters. Hillary Clinton is doing what most regular Democrats do when it comes to the African American vote. It's not anything particularly strange. Quick note for context. When George Bush was elected governor of Texas, he got like almost 20% of the black vote in Texas, right? But when he ran for president, he got like 10, right? And he was very popular amongst a certain segment of black voters in Texas. So no, that boogeyman is not there. The vast majority of African-American men are going to vote for the Democratic candidate. The vast majority of African-American women are going to vote for the Democratic candidate. And the rumors that are put out about that, and I want to address three things very quickly. One, people always try and use this example. They're like, yeah, black men abandoned Stacey Abrams. That's why she lost in 2022. That's not why Stacey Abrams lost her attempt at a governorship in 2022. She lost because there was like an 8 to 10% turnaround in white women voting. That's what cost her. Her support amongst white women cratered. It was not black men failing to turn out. The second thing is you've got two viral videos going on right now. One is Don Lemon in Cleveland, where he's walking around talking to black voters, and so many of them are saying Trump. Oh, I'm going to vote for Trump. And there's another video for a reporter from Sky News talking to some brothers at a basketball court in Columbus, Georgia, and they're all like, we're all voting for Trump. We're all voting for Trump. These are bogus. And trust me, this is not wishful thinking. I just know the data and I know the numbers. Number one, Sky News is the UK equivalent. It's a Murdoch company. It's the UK equivalent of Fox News. So you can't trust anything they report. And I'm sorry, but anytime you see a man on the street story, and I'm putting y'all on game, okay? As somebody who teaches journalism and knows journalism. Anytime you see a man on the street story, you always have to think of context. They are talking to people all day. The people who they put on camera are the ones who they think are going to draw the most interest. Okay, so when you have the Sky News reporter go down to this random basketball court, first off, a lot of brothers ain't going to want to talk to you. So you had to find the court. That's assuming that you didn't stage it.
Facts.
Right? You got to find the court. Who's willing to talk to you? Why are they willing to talk to you? And you notice they never ask, are you registered and have you voted? Because Zach, you and I both know, I assume you go to a barbershop to get your hair cut. I assume you go to certain locations. There's a big difference between people who talk about politics and people who participate. Facts. Some of the loudest, most pro-Trump brothers I know don't vote. They just like talking about it, right? So when you have these guys, it's like, who you vote for? Oh, yeah, I'm voting for Trump. You notice they never ask the question, did you vote in 2020? Did you vote in 2022? Are you registered? If the answer is not yes, yes, and yes, then they just talking smack on TV. And it's the same thing with Don Lemon. He's talking to all these people in Cleveland, blah, 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 blah. Remember, who wants to talk to him, right? Lots of people like, I don't want to talk to you. And again, Don Lemon, and I'm not questioning his integrity. I'm not attacking a fellow journalist. But what I am going to say is this. Don Lemon is trying to put together the clip that is the most interesting. And so if he goes into downtown Cleveland and 80% of the people say, yeah, I'm voting for Kamala Harris, I'm voting for the Democratic ticket, that doesn't go viral. Yeah. So we have to understand the way in which some of our news coverage is put out there, because these are people who have a vested interest in driving your eyeballs, not necessarily in sharing the truth.
There's this kind of like Trump or else attitude of like, hey, you should vote because we got to get Trump out of here. I'm curious, what is your perspective, especially like, I think recently there's been there's been some things floating around again online that the Harris Walz campaign, they're not going to really talk too much more about policy until after the election. Like, what is your perspective on that?
It's not true. It's not true. And I mean, Vice President Harris just gave a speech, I think it was in Raleigh last Friday, laying out our economic plan, talking about you shouldn't tax people's tips, talking about basically a new version of the GI Bill where they're going to help people who are first-generation home buyers. And I want to be clear about first-generation home buyers. You qualify as a first-generation home buyer if your parents, the people you were a tax dependent of, did not own their home. So it doesn't just work for people who are immigrants. It doesn't just work for, it's like if your parents didn't own their home, you qualify as a first-time home buyer. So she's already laid out an economic plan. I think the idea that Harris has been light on policy is kind of disingenuous. But again, it goes back to understanding the political press. So the television networks have now benefited from this Harris boom. She is like manna from heaven. People want to see her. They want to see Walz. They want to see their speeches. And now the written political press, right? The Hill, Politico, New York Times, Washington Post, well, they're trying to get in on the action. And they're angry that she has not sat down. That's where you're hearing I haven't heard enough policy from Harris, and she hasn't sat down and done an interview. And I'm going to be clear with you that Harris will eventually do an interview, right? But she's been the sitting vice president. You kind of know some of the stuff she believes in. She's got speeches. She's got white papers. But what it really boils down to is the inherent tension between a campaign and the press. They have not demonstrated, a lot of the political press, and I'm not saying every individual member, let's be fair, but a lot of the political press, like I said, they've been on that Trump narcotic for 7 or 8 years. They have not availed themselves well in many instances. And if I'm the Harris campaign and I'm doing well, and first off, I've only got 3 months to do this, right? I need to be out talking to people. If I'm going to set up a whole day where I sit down and talk to somebody at Axios or the New York Times or something else like that, I want it to be about me and my policy. But what we have seen from a lot of the press is her first 3 questions are going to be like, Donald Trump asked if you're black. How do you feel about that? Yesterday, Donald Trump had a chicken sandwich, and he said that fried chicken is very popular with black people. Do you feel insulted when he says that? The Harris campaign is like, if you're willing to interview me about me, we're good. But I don't need to waste my time doing an interview where all you're going to do is ask me how I respond to things that Trump said. And I did an interview a month ago on my podcast, A Word with Jason Johnson on Slate. You can get anywhere podcasts
link in the show
available.
notes.
I sat down and did an interview with second gentleman, soon possibly first gentleman, Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris's husband. And that's one of the main things he talked about. He's like, we talked the day after the NMBJ. He's like, Donald Trump lives to distract people. He's like, we have policy things to talk about. We have inflation to talk about and the border and all of these different kinds of issues that Harris has stances on. And the press only wants to talk about the latest terrible thing from Trump and what people say. So she's fine. She got an economic message. She's got a foreign policy message. It'll be delivered in due time. What you have is an angry print press who's mad that she ain't giving them the kind of attention that
So look, let's wrap up here. There's been a lot of discussion, rightfully so, attention over the past several months, almost now coming up on a year of the genocide in Palestine. And to your point about major press and the game of press media, the framing continues to be very I don't want to say Zionist, but I guess my question to you is, as you look at mainstream media and its framing, as well as some of these discussions, where or if at all do you think there's going to be a corner turn when it comes to aggressive pressuring on whomever is next for a ceasefire? We're seeing that now, kind of in spurts from different folks. We're seeing Kamala talk. She did speak about it after the interaction in Michigan or in Detroit. But we're also still seeing this White House provide billions of dollars to Israel for what they're calling a war. Thoughts on, or just what is your perspective on voters who have issues with that, and whether they're going to be uncommitted or not, in addition to how the mainstream media frames these conversations.
So I'm gonna speak on this from a campaign perspective, because that's what I'm actually an expert in. I think that there is too much commentary in the press of everybody suddenly becoming experts about every part of the world. We had the last 3 years, suddenly everybody's an expert on Ukraine, ain't never been there, couldn't find it on a map. Suddenly everybody is an epidemiologist, right? So I'm going to talk about this from the campaign purely perspective. Other people can speak of the specifics of what's happening to the region, and they can have their moral arguments. I'm going to say from a campaign perspective, what we've seen this year is that part of the issues that Joe Biden was having with younger voters was the fact that many younger voters are concerned about the United States' role in the conflict overseas. That's the issue, right? They were not pleased with the positions that Joe Biden took, and it was leading to many of them saying, I don't know if I'm going to vote for him for this reason, okay? Then you had Joe Biden step down. And what Harris said when Benjamin Netanyahu came to the United States, first off, she's like, I'm not meeting with you publicly. I'm not going to attend your speech at Congress. I'm going to go meet with, I think, the Sigma Gamma Rho sorority. And what she said was what is actually the median opinion of most mainstream Democrats and many Americans, where she said, Israel has a right to defend itself, but how Israel defends itself matters. And that is the position of most Democrats in America. That is the position of most party leaders in America. And so by Harris taking that position, which many young people did not believe that Joe Biden's position was there. They thought it was not that, basically. Whatever you want to say, they thought it wasn't the position that Harris laid out. Now that she has taken that particular position, I think you have many people who are voters who are willing to give her a chance because they say, okay, look, at least that sounds like how I feel about this issue. So I think that's very important for people to understand that this is from a campaign perspective I'm talking. The other thing I will say is this about the press. And this happened in the spring. And again, remember, I'm talking political press here. I'm not talking every newspaper and every magazine. I am a college professor, okay? I know campuses. And what you saw happening in the spring, while there were protests, okay, what you have to understand is that they weren't that widespread. And much of the press covered this like every campus in America was the No Church in a While video. Okay. And that's not what was going on. And so I think that that's important to remember. Most of the campus protests, first off, a lot of campuses didn't even have protests. They didn't have encampments. They had forums, meetings, discussions, conversations, right? And what I found to be problematic in the coverage is while attention was being placed on a couple of elite institutions in New York and elite institutions in Los Angeles, I'm thinking of schools like the University of Maryland College Park, right? Which is, I think, has the fourth or fifth highest population of Jewish students in America, right? As sort of as a percentage of campus or raw numbers. Why weren't people going there and talking to those students about how they felt? Why are you going to the loudest places? And also Wayne State University, which is outside of Detroit. Wayne State has the largest Muslim student population in the country. Why not go to the places where people who are most intimately affected by these issues might have something to say? But they skipped over that in order to go for the most provocative, incendiary, and unpleasant conversations and conflicts. So I am very much of the mindset that when you're going to cover a campus issue, you need to actually do a wide range of campuses. And you can't say that because this is happening in these 3 or 4 elite institutions, that this is somehow reflective of everything that's going on in the country. That's not fair. That's not good journalism. I don't think it even gives a chance for good faith people who are sincerely concerned, right? I think that's so important. That's why I say I talk about this from a campaign perspective, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert in any particular area, because I think you have people who authentically feel very strongly about what the United States is doing and how they feel the United States is doing, protecting its citizens, not protecting its citizens, allowing for speech. Those are real conversations to be had. And I don't think we always do a good job of hearing all of the voices and letting those voices speak freely. I think we go for the loudest person in the room, the most provocative sign, and you ignore the fact that a lot of the campus protests weren't nearly as volatile and violent as they were being presented.
Dr. Jason Johnson, look, it's been a pleasure. We're going to make sure to put your links in the show notes. Are we going to catch you on MS? Like, when are they giving you a show, man? Like, it's been, you pop on, I see you, my family gets excited. When are we getting the show? What is it going to be called? Like, come on, drop the T here so we can be the first person to drop the news.
So I'm gonna tell you the big new project I'm working on. I have a book that I'm working on. It will be done. The book will be done and finished before Election Day. So I'm shooting for either November 1st or the 17th. There's a very special meaning behind both of those dates. So that's my next big project. I am happy to be at MSNBC. I'm happy to be at Slate. I'm happy to be at Morgan State University. Hell, football season's about to start. I'm hopefully going to be doing some football writing. I've been saying, for those of you, this may be obscure for y'all who don't understand this, but I've been saying for a long time that if Kamala Harris ends up becoming president of the United States, Joe Biden is the Alex Smith of American presidents, right? And if you know anything about football, Alex Smith was the quarterback who got replaced by Colin Kaepernick. Then he went to Kansas City and got replaced by Pat Mahomes, okay? If Joe Biden ends up being the VP to the first black president and then ushering in our second black president, he's the Alex
legendary.
Smith. Legendary. Like, people don't realize how important a role Alex Smith played in sort of mentoring and guiding two of the most prominent black quarterbacks in the history of the NFL, Kaepernick for different reasons than Mahomes. But I say that to say I'll be doing some writing this fall. I have my graphic novel. Like I said, I'm going to be done writing that by November. I continue to be at MSNBC. Hey, I appreciate everybody who watches, everybody who stops me. And this gives you an example of how much I travel. Everybody who stops me in Giant, everybody who stops me in Publix, everybody who stops me in Albertsons, right? everybody who stops me in Giant Eagle, right? These are the
you around, yeah, you moving.
Yeah, I'm around. Maybe occasionally a Harris Teeter. But yeah, I appreciate everything when people watch. Always tweet the network and everything else like that. And I continue to do the great things that are available. I love it when I get to sit in and host. I get to work with fantastic teams. And we'll see what the new campaign season brings, or certainly 2025.
Dr. Johnson, thank you so much. We look forward to having you back soon, man. Take care.
Thank you, man. I appreciate your patience.
Peace.